You've been saving 20% of every paycheck for 6 years. You are exactly as far from rich as the day you started. You did the spreadsheet. Set up the automatic transfer the week you finally got serious about money. Watch the number climb a little every month and let yourself feel proud of it. Skipped vacations, ate at home more than you wanted to, told yourself this was the responsible thing, the grown-up thing, the thing that eventually adds up. Your co-workers think you're good with money. Your parents say it out loud at dinner sometimes. None of them are looking at the number that actually matters. It hasn't changed the way they think it has. Go check the account right now if you want to. It's bigger than it used to be. It is not the number anyone promised you. Maybe you've opened the app at midnight, scrolling past the balance, doing the math one more time, hoping you got it wrong. You didn't get it wrong. The math has been right this whole time. That's the actual problem. Think about the actual ritual of it. Phone face down on the nightstand, then face up again because you couldn't help it. Banking app, thumb on the balance. A number you've already memorized, checked anyway, like checking a wound to see if it healed since this morning. It didn't. It's the same number it was at lunch. You already knew that before you opened the app. You opened it anyway, because some part of you keeps hoping the number will surprise you, and some part of you knows it never will. There's a reason for that. It's not the reason your financial advisor is going to tell you. Telling you would end his job. It's not a complicated reason either. It just sounds wrong the first time you hear it, the way a true thing sometimes sounds wrong before it sounds obvious. By the end of this video, it won't sound wrong anymore. By the end of this video, you'll know the one rule hiding under every rule you've ever been taught about money. Why obedient savers stay exactly where they started, year after year, while a smaller group quietly stops playing the same game. You're probably making somewhere between $30,000 and $80,000 a year. You're not reckless. You've done everything in the order you were told. The order was never the problem. That smaller group isn't smarter than you, they just stopped asking the question everyone else keeps asking. 500 years ago, a man named Niccolò Machiavelli sat in exile outside Florence, stripped of his title, broke, watching power move without him from a farmhouse he never wanted to live in. He didn't write his way back into comfort. He wrote the most honest book about power ever written, for a man who needed to win, not feel good about losing slowly. The Prince wasn't a book about being good. It was a book about what actually moves people, what holds power, what gets taken from those too cautious to act. He wrote it for the Medici, the same family that had imprisoned and tortured him before throwing him out of the city. He wasn't flattering them. He was proving, from a farmhouse with no title left, that he understood power better than the men holding it. There's a line in it that should be tattooed on every 25-year-old's forehead. It is better to be impetuous than cautious. Fortune, he wrote, is a river in flood season. It yields to the bold and drowns the hesitant. Not recklessness. The difference between a man who acts and a man who waits for permission. He'd watched the cautious diplomats he worked beside lose everything to men who simply moved first. That lesson cost him something. He wrote it from exile, with no income and nothing left to protect. Caution feels like safety. It isn't. It's just a slower, quieter way of losing, dressed up so it doesn't feel like losing. What Machiavelli understood about power 5 centuries ago is the thing modern personal finance refuses to say about money. Caution doesn't protect you. It makes you predictable to people who profit from that. So let's talk about the rule you've followed since you were old enough to open a checking account, and who it actually serves, because it was never you. Rule 1. The 20% rule was never designed to make you rich, it was designed to make you stable. Those sound like the same thing. You make $50,000, close to the median for this audience, you save 20%. Sounds aggressive, almost virtuous. $10,000 a year, before taxes quietly eat into it. At an average market return, that takes more than 30 years to cross $500,000, 30 years to arrive at a number that, after inflation, buys you roughly what 200,000 buys today. You'll be 60, maybe older, if it pays off at all. Make it 80,000 instead, 16,000 a year. The timeline shortens, not as much as you'd hope. Sit with that, not as a number on a screen, as your actual life, your actual Tuesdays. 2 or 3 job changes in there. A few years where rent ate more than it should have. A funeral, maybe a kid. All while the account inches forward by a few $100s a month and calls itself progress. Run the numbers on what that 30-year version of you actually does every single payday. Direct deposit hits. A slice peels off automatically before you even see it. You never touch it, never think about it, never ask it a question. That's the whole design. Money you don't have to think about is money that doesn't have to earn its keep. Compare that to someone who took that same 10,000 and put it into one move inside 5 years instead of spreading it across 30. They didn't get there because they were luckier. The 20% rule isn't a wealth strategy. It's a stability ritual wearing a wealth strategy's clothes. Stability sells easier than the truth does. But the math is the surface. The real damage is what 20 years of saving teaches you to become. Rule 2. Saving without a target is just hoarding with better branding. Most people save a percentage, not toward anything, because a parent said to, a podcast said to, a coworker who seemed to have it figured out said to. Money without a destination doesn't compound into power, it sits, losing value quietly while you feel responsible for putting it there. $10,000 in a savings account, paying 0.5%. 5 years untouched, because untouched feels safe. In real terms, it's worth less than the day you deposited it. Same 10,000, used as a down payment at the right moment on something that produces. A small rental, a stake in a friend's growing business, equipment for a skill you could license. Same money, same starting point. The difference was never the amount. Here's what it actually feels like from the inside, because the feeling matters as much as the math. You log in, the number's gone up $40 since last month. You feel something, relief maybe, or a small flicker of pride. Then you close the app and go back to your day. That feeling has no destination either. It's a reward for nothing. A dog gets a treat for sitting. You get a notification for doing absolutely nothing with your own money. Wealthy people rarely use the word saving. They call it capital, waiting for deployment. It sits with intention, not out of habit. Ask someone who actually built something what their money was doing 2 years before they spent it. They'll usually tell you, waiting on a property in a specific zip code, waiting on a lease to expire so they could buy out the business, waiting on a license, a permit, a market dip. The money had a job before it ever left the account. Most people's money has never had a job in its life. There's a specific anxiety that comes from money with no job to do. You feel like you should be doing something, you don't know what, so you keep adding to the pile and calling that strategy. The pile gets bigger, the anxiety doesn't go anywhere. Nobody ever asked you, going up toward what? Rule 3. Caution is a tax the cautious pay forever. Nobody sends you the bill. Index funds, automatically, every paycheck. Dollar cost averaging, never anything concentrated, never anything that could fail. It is better to be impetuous than cautious. He wrote that about kingdoms 500 years before index funds existed. It applies just as brutally to your checking account. 2 people, $20,000 each. One spreads it thin across funds they couldn't name if you asked, untouched for 10 years. The other puts it fully into one opportunity they actually understood. A small business in a niche they know cold. The diversified 20,000 grows at a forgettable pace. The concentrated 20,000, when it works, multiplies, sometimes 3 or 4 times over. It can also fail completely. That's real. This video isn't going to pretend otherwise. But perpetual caution has a failure mode too. It just fails slowly enough that you don't notice until you're 55 doing the math for the first time. A contractor who spends 15 years taking only the safest, smallest jobs, never bids on the project that scares him a little. He never goes bankrupt. He also never builds the company that hires 50 people and makes him rich. Nobody calls that a failure. Nothing dramatic happened. It just quietly never happened either. Picture him at 55, still bidding small jobs, still solvent, still, by every visible measure, fine. Ask him what happened to the bigger contract he passed on at 31, and watch his face. He remembers the exact number. He's just never said it out loud, because saying it out loud means admitting the safe choice had a cost too. He'll tell you he made the responsible call. He'll believe it, mostly. The number he remembers says something different than the story he tells. Safety isn't free. You've just never seen the receipt. There's a number that never gets calculated because nobody's job is to calculate it. Not the banks, not the advisors, not yours, until tonight. It's the difference between the path you took and the path sitting right next to it, the one you glanced at and walked past because it felt like too much risk for a Tuesday. That number has a name in finance textbooks, opportunity cost, and then it gets filed away as theory, something academic, nothing that applies to an actual person deciding whether to wire $20,000 into something real. It applies to exactly that person. It applied to you more than once, on a decision you've already half forgotten making. The gap between the cautious path and the concentrated one doesn't shrink with patience, it widens. Every year, one compounds slowly, the other compounds on conviction. Ask who taught you to be this cautious. It wasn't a stranger. Rule 4. The bank loves your 20%. Ask yourself why. You were taught from your first checking account that putting money in the bank is the responsible move. Nobody explained what the bank does with it once it lands there. They pay you 0.5%, maybe a full point if you shop around. Then they lend that same money back out to someone else at 7%. Sometimes far more on a credit card. That spread is their profit, built on your money, sitting there, patient, exactly the way you were taught patience should look. $10,000 for a year. At 0.5% you earn $50. The bank lends out that same $10,000 at 7% and earns $700. You did the saving. They kept $650 for doing nothing but holding what was already yours. You weren't saving. You were funding someone else's leverage and calling it discipline. It's printed in their annual reports, in language boring enough that nobody reads past the first page. Go find one. Search the words net interest margin. That's the whole business model sitting in a footnote written so flat that it puts you to sleep before you understand what it's telling you. Caution is profitable. For them, that's the entire reason the advice exists in the form you've heard it 1,000 times. Walk into any branch, look at the posters. Every one of them is selling patience. None of them sell leverage, because leverage is the thing they use on you. Picture a guy named Marcus. Not his real name, doesn't matter. 34. Did everything right for 9 years. Checking account, savings account, the whole script. Then he noticed something on his own credit card statement. 18% on the balance he carried 2 months that year. 18% on a card issued by the exact bank holding his savings at 0.5 point. He did the math sitting at his kitchen table on a Sunday. He was paying the bank 36 times more to borrow than they paid him to save. Same bank, same Sunday afternoon he used to spend feeling fine about both numbers. He didn't quit the bank. You can't, not really, not in any way that matters. He flipped the relationship instead, stopped carrying any balance, ever, so the 18% stopped applying to him completely. Then he went and became the 7%, took $8,000 and lent it, structured properly, to a friend's contractor business that needed working capital between jobs. He became the spread, not the guy funding it. That's the whole rule, compressed into one Sunday at one kitchen table. The bank was never the enemy. The bank was just never going to tell him there was another side of that ledger to stand on. Rule 5. Diversification is how you guarantee you'll stay exactly average. Don't put your eggs in one basket. It sounds like wisdom because it rhymes with caution, and caution always sounds wise to someone who's never tested it. It takes whatever edge you might have, any real understanding of one thing you've spent years learning, and dilutes it into irrelevance. $50,000 split across 30 assets you can barely name, recommended by an app that profits whether you win or lose. Same 50,000 concentrated in one asset you actually understand. The app collects its fee either way, every quarter, regardless of what happens to your money. It doesn't care if the 30 assets crawl or sprint. The fee is the product. Your return was always the byproduct. Over 10 years, the diluted 50,000 drifts with whatever the market average happens to be. The concentrated 50,000, backed by real knowledge, often beats it by an uncomfortable margin. Think about the one thing you understand better than most people around you, your industry, your neighborhood, a skill you spent years getting good at without realizing it had a price tag. Maybe it's something nobody would call an asset. You know which 3 blocks in your city are about to get expensive 2 years before the listings catch up, because you drive them every day for work. You know exactly what a restaurant needs to fix before it dies, because you worked the line for 6 years. That knowledge is worth more than 30 mediocre stock picks, chosen by an algorithm that has never once met you. This isn't an argument to bet your savings on a stock tip from a stranger. It's that diversification gets marketed as the only responsible option for everyone at every stage. That universal framing is the lie. Diluted power is not power. He never built an army by spreading his forces thin across every front, hoping nothing went wrong anywhere. He concentrated force where it mattered and won there. The advisors telling you to diversify everything are managing money for thousands of people at once. It protects them from one client blaming them for a bad call. It was never built to protect your outcome. Notice what they never get blamed for, either. Average is a defensible answer in a meeting. Nobody gets fired for matching the market. Plenty of people get fired for the concentrated bet that didn't pay off, even when the math behind it was sound. So the incentive isn't pointed at your wealth at all. It's pointed at nobody being able to point a finger later. That's a perfectly reasonable thing for an advisor managing 1,000 accounts to optimize for. It is a strange thing for you to be optimizing for, with your one account, your one shot at this decade. Rule 6. Time in the market is a story written for people who can't afford to move fast. Just wait. The market always goes up eventually. Let compound interest do the work while you sleep. Not false. Incomplete. The missing piece is the part that matters most to someone earning what you earn. 10,000 a year, 30 years, average return, $500,000. The patient path. A single, well-timed move using leverage instead of pure patience. A property bought with a mortgage, where the bank's money does most of the lifting, appreciating over 10 years in a market you actually studied. That move can multiply the same starting capital faster than 3 decades of obedient saving. Walk through it slowly, because this is the part people skip past too fast to actually understand. 20,000 down on a property worth 200,000, the bank puts up the other 180. The property appreciates 4% a year, which is unremarkable, nothing aggressive. After 10 years, it's worth roughly 300,000. Your 20,000 turned into something closer to 120 on paper, before you've even touched the rent it might have collected along the way. The bank's money did most of the lifting. You supplied the down payment and the decision. Leverage cuts both ways. A bad property, too much debt, the wrong market, that can wipe someone out faster than 30 years of slow saving ever loses money. The point isn't borrow money and hope. The point is that informed, intentional speed exists, and most people are never told it's on the table. Ask anyone who built wealth this way. The hard part was never the math. The hard part was moving before they felt ready. Nobody, ever, in any field, feels completely ready. There's a version of this that doesn't involve real estate at all, and it matters because not everyone wants to be a landlord. A woman who'd spent 8 years doing freelance bookkeeping, charging by the hour like everyone told her to, $40 an hour, capped at how many hours existed in a week. She took 6 months, packaged what she already knew into a course for small business owners drowning in their own receipts, priced it at $400. The first version was rough. She sold 11 copies the first month. That's not the story. The story is what happened by year 3, when the course had been refined, bundled with templates, sold through an email list that grew on autopilot while she slept. The same $40 an hour knowledge, now selling itself without her hours attached to it at all. She didn't get paid more for the same hour. She built something that got paid without her in the room. That's leverage too. It just doesn't come with a mortgage attached. Both paths start the same way. Stop asking how much time can I trade this week, and start asking what can I build, once that keeps paying after I stop showing up. If you've made it this far, you already suspect something underneath all of this. Every rule wasn't random advice from well-meaning strangers. Someone designed it, and it wasn't you, and it wasn't on your side. Rule 7. The 20% rule exists to keep you voting with your wallet, never with power. This is the part nobody at your bank says to your face. Saying it out loud ends the arrangement. A population that saves obediently, diversifies obediently, waits patiently for 40 years, that's a stable population, predictable, never threatening to anyone who already holds real capital. What does a company lose if its employees stop being patient? If half the office quietly built a second income stream over 5 years, nobody's desperate for the next small raise. Nobody's afraid to push back. Patience, at scale, is profitable, just never for you. You were never taught to build leverage. You were taught to wait your turn. The average disciplined saver follows every rule. Maxes the retirement account on schedule, arrives at 65 with $400,000, dependent on the market behaving and an employer who kept the paychecks coming. Someone who, 15 years earlier, quietly stopped optimizing for safety and started optimizing for ownership instead. A business that grew slowly, then not so slowly. A property bought with leverage, a skill licensed out repeatedly instead of traded hour for hour. That person isn't just wealthier by 65, they were never dependent the same way for decades. Dependent, that's the actual difference. One person spent 40 years hoping the system kept its promises. The other spent 15 years making sure they never needed it to. A prince who keeps his subjects comfortable, fed, mildly distracted, rarely has to worry about a revolt. Comfortable people don't revolt. They don't ask hard questions. They keep saving 20% and calling it a plan. You're allowed to unsee a lot of things. You're not going to unsee this one. Rule 8. Your paycheck was never the asset. Your decisions were. The percentage you save was never the real lever. It feels like the lever because it's the only number a budgeting app knows how to show you. 2 people, $60,000 each, same starting point. One saves diligently for a decade, ends up with a respectable cushion. The other spends a fraction of the decade building one skill, one asset, one piece of leverage they actually came to understand cold. 10 years later, the first person has savings, the second has options, income that doesn't require trading more hours for it. The asset was never the dollars sitting in the account. It was the decision that put those dollars somewhere they could grow into something larger than themselves. A skill, once it's yours, doesn't care about market downturns, doesn't care if your employer has a bad quarter. Think about what actually happened in those 2 parallel decades. The saver's 10 years produced one outcome, a bigger number in the same account, doing the same nothing it was always doing. The builder's 10 years produced something different at every stage. Year 1, just a skill getting sharper, invisible from the outside, no dollar figure attached to it yet. Year 4, the first client who paid for it without being asked twice. Year 7, the first month where the income showed up whether or not that week was actually worked. Year 10, something that could be sold, handed off or scaled, because it had stopped depending on one specific person's hours entirely. None of those years would show up on a savings statement. A savings statement only has one column. Life, it turns out, has several. Decisions compound, percentages just accumulate. Picture yourself a year from now, still doing exactly this, still checking the same app at midnight. Now picture yourself having asked the harder question and acted on it. Those two futures don't look that different at first. They look completely different by year 10. Being rich was never a number you arrive at after enough years of quiet obedience. It's a permission you take the moment you stop waiting for someone else to grant it. Nobody is coming to hand you that permission. The waiting itself was the trap. You don't need a higher percentage next paycheck. You need a different question. Not how much can I safely set aside this month? What am I actually building, and who benefits if I never get around to asking that? You can still save. That isn't the villain here. The villain was believing the percentage, on its own, was ever going to be enough. Here's the part that won't make it into the comments section, because it's not a number and people only argue about numbers. Every single rule in this video, the savings habit, the diversification, the patience, the waiting, works exactly as advertised for exactly the people it was built for. It's not broken. It's not a scam, not in the legal sense, not in any sense you could sue over. It was just never calibrated to your timeline. It was calibrated to a system's timeline. The system doesn't care if you're 65 when the math finally works, because the system isn't the one who has to wait. It collects the spread in real time, every quarter, regardless of when your number finally arrives. Your patience is its product. That was the whole arrangement, every step of the way. You weren't lied to exactly. You were handed someone else's plan and told it was yours. There's a particular moment, usually around 40, where this becomes impossible to ignore. The retirement projection finally gets specific enough to feel real instead of theoretical. You see the actual age. You do the actual subtraction. How many working years are left between now and that number? For some people, that subtraction is the first honest conversation they've ever had with their own finances. For most people, it arrives about 15 years too late to do anything but adjust the spreadsheet and keep going. You don't have to wait for that moment. That's the only real gift in any of this. You're getting the subtraction now, tonight, while there's still enough runway left for the answer to change something. You don't need to act tonight either, if we're being honest. Nobody builds a rental portfolio or launches a course by sunrise. What you need tonight is smaller than that and harder than that. You need to stop calling the 20% a finished plan. Call it what it actually is, a floor, not a ceiling. Keep it. Just stop mistaking it for the whole building. Most people will finish this video tonight and keep saving the same 20% tomorrow morning. A few will go back and recalculate everything they thought they knew, starting from the assumption that the rule was never written for them. The 20% rule was never going to make you rich. It was only ever going to make you obedient. Decide which one you are. Not someday, tonight. Not after one more paycheck, not after you've looked into it, not after the next time the number disappoints you at midnight and you promise yourself you'll finally do something about it. Tonight, while this is still sitting in your chest instead of buried back under tomorrow's schedule.